How does inflation work? This is actually a far more complicated question than it appears at first glance. As you may have seen from previous responses, one answer suggests that if money supply grows faster than GDP, you will see inflation manifested in a reduction of purchasing power, i.e., your currency dollar buys less, or in other words it takes more dollars to buy goods and services than it did in the past. There are several oversimplifications here. First, in the normal course of events, nearly all manufactured goods should be declining in price as technology advances and productivity increases. Secondly, with globalization, manufacturing has been largely offshored to low-wage countries and costs reductions from updated technology have been enhanced by low labor costs. Third, the definition of money supply is apparently somewhat arbitrary. M3 was a definition with widespread use for decades until the Federal Reserve declined to continue publishing the data some years ago in advance of the implementation of the quantitative easing policy. And what many people have regarded as a measure of inflation, the Consumer Price Index (CPI), has been subjected to outright manipulation over the past 30 or so years, one of the notable occasions being upon the report of the Boskin Commission in the mid-90s. Definitions of the composition of the CPI were changed to reduce the reported number. Some of these changes have a superficial justification. For example, the capability of much electronic equipment has improved vastly in the past 2 decades, and automobiles have more standard equipment such as electronic stability control and anti-skid braking. So even if base models cost more, the impact may not show up as an increase in the CPI because the quality improvement is claimed to outweigh the price increase. Far more egregious is the practice of substitution, whereby the price of an item like steak is replaced by the price of hamburger. The constructors of the CPI noted that market preferences were changing and less steak was being consumed and more hamburger, and felt that hamburger would be a more representative constituent of the consumer basket. Obviously this is fraudulent. Consumers were, in my opinion, eating less steak and more hamburger due to cost, not taste preference. This substitution was a response to price increases, which the change hid from the CPI. It is interesting to note that the inflation being caused by the huge increases in the money supply can be evaluated by contrasting the past purchasing power of monetary specie, i.e., silver and gold. 1964 was the last year that the U.S. Mint issued silver coins for general circulation. At that time gasoline was about 30 cents a gallon. That is, 3 silver dimes bought you a gallon. It takes about 13 dimes to make up an ounce. An ounce of silver is currently worth about $20, so each silver dime now has about $1.50 worth of silver in it, so 3 silver dimes today would still buy you a gallon of gas. There are those who contend that hard money is not flexible enough for modern economies. I disagree. It would be hugely valuable in constraining spendthrift and warmongering governments and would provide better assurance that your savings would retain and even increase their purchasing power, in contrast to the current situation. Quantitative easing has just been a means to supply governments and large financial institutions with unduly cheap money in a way that has badly hurt savers, pension funds, endowments, insurance funds, etc. It has not stimulated investment borrowing as proposed because entrepreneurs see an indebted society. They work on margins, not just borrowing costs. No one is going to borrow at 5% if they think that the chance of making 6% is low, but will borrow at 10% if confident of making 20%. Inflation means general rise in the price of goods and services. Types of inflation. Demand pull inflation. This means the demand is very high and the supply is low, creating indifference which results in increase in price of the commodities. Cost push inflation. This takes place when the cost of raw material in producing is high, thus leads to increase in price. Example of how inflation is calculated. Take the example of any commodity. Let's take onion. Say onion is initially priced at 100 Indian rupees for a kilogram, but with inflation of 5% it has become 105 Indian rupees. Now here it simply indicates that because of inflation the common man has to shell out 5 Indian rupees extra for a kilogram of onion, right? This is what inflation exactly is. Inflation can also occur due to high money circulation, higher money with the public and so forth. Inflation is a quite complex economic parameter. Economists themselves have been puzzled.